Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Truman, Todd Pruitt, and Aimee Bird. Mortification of Spin is a weekly podcast from the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Homeschool, public school, private school, what's the right option for Christians? It's not an easy question to answer, but the Spin team takes a crack at it just for you. Keep listening after the conversation to find out how to enter a drawing for an MP3 set from the Alliance.
Welcome to Mortification of Spin. You'll have to bear with us for a moment because we're just arriving outside of school. We've been taking a trip on one of the big yellow buses. Aimee and I, of course, are at the back of the bus with all the cool kids singing along. Nobody was willing to sit with Todd, so he's been up front with the teacher, sitting there, as one can imagine. I mean, you have to feel a certain amount of sorrow for those who are more socially challenged, shall we say, than the rest of us. But we've been on the school bus today. We wanted to talk to the kids about education, and we want to have a discussion today about educational choices for Christian parents. Does the church have a role? What sort of role should the church have? Are there certain choices that are wiser or better for children and parents than others? So I want to throw it open to my two colleagues at this point as Todd wanders towards the back of the bus to join us. Todd, you got three kids. Presume you had them educated in some way.
We did have them educated. I will say that sitting in the front of the bus is very nice because you can have a mature conversation with the bus driver. And just like...
you have mature conversations?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, like the lunch lady. Me and the lunch lady are best friends as well.
I wondered why the bus driver was crying.
So, obviously, we all know that for Christians, there's only one option for educating your children, correct?
What's that?
Well, it's just homeschooling, and that's it.
Oh, okay.
All other options are government conspiracies spearheaded by the Illuminati, enforced by the Knights Templar, in order to destroy the family. I think the discussion's over at this point.
Yeah, I think the government office for that is in Area 51.
It is.
In New Mexico.
You laugh, but I have strong suspicions.
Yeah, I'm told your Facebook page is a very interesting read in terms of right-wing crazy conspiracy sites.
World Nut Daily. Yes, absolutely. Alex Jones is my Walter Cronkite. So, obviously I'm jesting because I actually don't believe there's only one option for Christian parents. However, we've got brothers and sisters that have a strong leaning in that direction that would rebuke you if your children, even in some cases they would rebuke you if your children were even in a Christian school.
Yeah. Well, we know they're wrong, so do we have to engage them or?
Well, I think this is obviously a very, very tender subject. You'll meet people who are offended by the idea of Christian school because they believe that you're underserving your children and that they should be out in a public school in order to be a part of the Great Commission. So I've had that. I've known of youth pastors that have shamed kids that are homeschooled or in Christian school because they're not engaging in the Great Commission. That's a problem. We also, I think the three of us, although we might nuance some of our positions a little differently, and I hope that we can get into a very personal disagreement here in just a minute. But we also know of those who would say that you're failing as a Christian parent if you're not homeschooling your kids, and they would seek to bind your conscience in that way. So this is a very tender discussion. In churches, it can be very divisive. I think probably all three of us have seen it become a divisive issue in our churches. And so we'll probably want to get into some of the pastoral implications and some of the relational implications. How do we navigate when somebody tells you you're in sin if your kids aren't being homeschooled, and some of those other types of arguments? How would you deal with a youth pastor or somebody in your church that says, you're wrong and you're isolating your child for homeschooling them? They ought to be participating in the Great Commission by being in the public school. How would you respond to that? Because in both cases, we have somebody seeking to bind the conscience, right? So,
should the church run a military academy training women to patriotically serve their country?
Are you suggesting that there are some churches that don't do this? We do rappelling down the side of our building. We've already stockpiled arms. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you pull-ups? Make sure those women get their 3 pull-ups in.
Absolutely.
Before they
We've got to
turn
protect
18,
our
maybe.
women. Yeah.
Aimee, what's your perspective? Because, of course, your husband, Matt, is actually a public school teacher.
Yes, my husband is a 5th grade teacher in the public school. He has been for 21 years.
Member of the Illuminati, but we won't get into that.
And I know there are a lot of challenges in the public school system, and I don't think that with any of the options that we have before us that we should go in with some sort of pride that we have made the right decision completely. I know we take it year by year. Our children are in public school right now. We have a great public school system where we live. However, I've had plenty of conflicts where we know that no matter which option you take, it's the parents who have the ultimate responsibility for the education of their children. Mm-hmm. So just because our children are in public school, that doesn't mean that, my son's 4th grade teacher is the ultimate educator of our son. Mm-hmm. And so I would agree with homeschoolers in that sense. Mm-hmm. But also, I think we need to make our choices in humility. So whether you've decided to homeschool, whether you're going the private school, the Christian school, or the public school, I think we need to make that choice with a lot of humility.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also think we need to keep, dare I say it, education in perspective. Mm-hmm. One of the striking things that Katrina and I found when we first moved to the States 14 years ago now, we'd visit churches, is the big question that people would ask us after the service, after they asked us our names, was where we sent our kids to school, how we educated our children.
Right, it's like a primary issue.
Yeah, and it struck me as interesting that nobody ever asked me, what's your view of the Trinity? Nobody ever asked me if I held to penal substitution.
Interesting.
Right. Nobody ever asked me what I thought of the Chalcedonian definition of the Incarnation. I was thinking, all of these things that the church has actually found it important to define over the years didn't seem to be part of the priorities when we were being talked to afterwards. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but it's a bit weird for somebody to come up and say to you, what's your view of the Chalcedonian definition? I'd say, yeah, but it was also weird for us coming from Britain to have somebody come up and ask where we were educating our kids, because frankly, we didn't think it was any of their business.
Yeah.
So it struck me as interesting that an awful lot of ink has been spilled over education in the last 20, 25 years.
People get very angry over this issue.
People get very angry over the issue. A lot of passion is generated over it. And that's not to say that it isn't worth generating passion over, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that I think appears, at least in terms of emphasis, to be downplayed by many Christians.
Right.
That's actually things upon which the church has found it necessary to opine. So I'm making an observation there more than proposing a solution or a conclusion, but just saying, it's interesting to me that education has become something of a fixation in some Christian quarters, in a way that there's a whole heap of other stuff that we should also be fixated on, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with, as far as the decision to whether or not to have your child in a public school, a lot of it has to do with where you live. Right. I know some people might think that I'm naive at this point, but I'm convinced I'm not. There are public school systems out there that are better than others. And so we've had our children at various times in Christian school, and we've had them in public school. We have a daughter who's already graduated, but we have 2 sons in high school, and they're in a public school where we live. And I knew that it was a decent choice when I found out recently from my youngest son, who's a freshman, that he has a teacher that's a huge Ronald Reagan fan. And I knew then that we were in the right place. I knew then. He's even heard about Margaret Thatcher. He's been the teacher has read a speech by Margaret Thatcher to the school. So I knew then that we were in good shape. Now I jest a little bit, but the fact is, we can all think of areas in the country and particular school systems where it would probably be a horrific place for to place our child, where either things like violence or, on the other end, aggressive homosexualist agenda, which we know is creeping into a lot of school systems in the country, where at that point then a parent has a very serious choice before them. Let me ask both of you this. How would you respond to someone who said to you, all 3 of us here have had our kids in public school, so how would you respond if to someone who said to you, you are shirking your responsibility as a parent by turning your child's education over to the state?
I'm
would you
not
respond
turning
to
my
that?
kids' education over to the state. I'm primarily, and my husband are primarily responsible for my child's education.
But they would say to you, the state has your kids for 7 to 8 hours a day. So in a practical sense, absolutely you've done that.
I would say I'm handing my children over for that period of time to people who are more competent to teach those academic subjects than I am. By the time my kids left the public school system age 17, they were able to read novels in German. I can't read German like that.
Yeah.
They were able to do mathematical computations, the like of which I never saw. And I went to a fairly elite public school back in the United Kingdom 30 years ago, and I went on to the University of Cambridge. I did well.
Right.
And I would say my boys had an education the equal of the one I had in the school area in which we lived, which is it's not a particularly wealthy area. It's I would say an upper level blue collar worker area by and large. We live in outside of Philadelphia, but it's an area where parents place a high premium, as so often people moving out of the working classes do, place a high premium on education.
Right.
So, and I would also agree with Aimee. I mean, I've had this pushback from people before, say, well, who teaches your kids about the Bible? I do.
Right.
And the church does.
Right.
And frankly, I trust the church to teach my kids about the Bible more than I even would a Christian school.
Right.
Because
I
the
agree.
church has a proper biblical hierarchy and accountability and
And
promises
I don't
attached
want-
to it.
I agree.
I don't want my children to learn religion in school, or Christianity anyway, in the school, and I don't want them to learn math in the church.
Yeah.
I don't expect the pastor to be able to teach my children math.
Sure. Okay, so what would you, and again, I'm questioning you as a friend on this issue because my sons are in public school. So, but let me ask you this. What would you say to those who say, I want my kids in an educational environment where the presupposition is that God is rather than God is not, because that will impact how they learn history,
I
how they
think
learn
that
the sciences.
is a valid reason why some people choose to homeschool or to take their children to Christian school, and I understand that.
Right.
And so that's why I say we make our choices in humility. However, Matt and I kind of look at it as, we're teaching that in the home.
Right.
And we have these conversations with the kids all the time because they've had, plenty of Christian teachers and they've had plenty of teachers who are not Christians. Right. And we feel like we are preparing them for the world because we don't just live in a Christian bubble. And they're not, if they go to college, they may or may not be going to a Christian college. And even there are plenty of Christian colleges where you need discernment wherever you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I know
we feel
plenty
like
of
we are
Christian
coaching our
colleges.
children right now before they are sent out into the world and whatever jobs that or career track they take. Or so there's a coaching element that we really think is important.
I'm glad you raised the Christian college issue because one of the things that I have routinely told parents is that very often, for the spiritual health of their child, very often, it's a better idea to send your kid to a secular university than a Christian university because more often than not, that Christian university is going to be very often left-leaning in their theology. It's far better to send your kid to a state university than a moderate to liberal Christian university.
Yeah, I would much rather spend my money on honest secularism than dishonest secularism pretending to be Christianity. And I think when you look
That's
at some of the very
damaging.
high-profile Christian colleges in this country, and you see some of the things that are going on there and some of the things that are being said by the professors there, frankly, it's not much different to what my kids went to. Well, one went to University of Pennsylvania, one's at Georgetown. It's not much different to what my kids hear at Penn and Georgetown, but the difference is they expect to hear it at Penn and Georgetown. It's not coming glossed in some sort of this is Orthodox Christianity way. It's, I'm a criminal, here I am, look at me. It's not, hey, I'm a Christian, but actually I'm picking your pocket and pretending to give you Christianity when I'm giving you secularism.
Yeah.
A colleague's wife at Westminster once commented in my presence that she'd moved her kids from Christian school to public school because, and I remember this comment, she just found it ultimately easier to explain non-Christian hypocrisy than Christian
That's
hypocrisy.
exactly how I feel
Now,
about that.
that's not an indictment of every Christian
No,
school
because
or every
there's some
Christian
really good
teacher
ones.
out there, but it is to point to the fact that, Christian school, often the Christianity in Christian schools is not as great as it tells the parents in the brochure.
Right.
You've got to be discerning.
Absolutely.
I happen to live in an area where there's a good Christian school. One of my elders teaches at a Christian school just down the road. It's a good Christian school. But parents need to do their homework on Christian schools.
Sure.
You need to look into the qualifications of the teachers and their education.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with homeschool. There are some parents who are really fabulous homeschool parents. And there are co-ops now that make that a little easier, where they can actually organize and gather together with other homeschoolers. However, if you're not equipped to do that, like my husband gets so many homeschool kids put into the system who are years behind because these parents thought it was the best moral decision, but they weren't equipped to teach their children for whatever reasons. And so this child is now at such a disadvantage coming in, not being exposed to that kind of social system, nor having the proper education level. And so then who are they placed with?
Right.
They're placed with the lower kids.
Exactly. And I've seen both, just as you said. I've seen kids whose parents were clearly not gifted or skilled in educating, and it hurt the kids. And then my sister-in-law happens to be very gifted in this area, and she educated their kids at home and did a fabulous job. But because
I see
she's
a lot
equipped,
of people do a really good job.
She's formally equipped to do that. And so naturally she did a great job. Okay, so let me turn the tables on you for a minute.
I think you've been turning the tables on for the last 20 minutes.
What's going on here?
If you'll
Please
notice,
turn them again, because then they're against you, I think.
well, I was going to say, if you'll notice, I've positioned myself to be asking the questions rather than answering them.
So that's how you got sent to the front of the bus the first time, I think.
But let me ask you this. Now, imagine yourself as either being homeschoolers or having your kids in Christian school, and you have somebody come to you on the opposite end of this thing and saying, you are sheltering your kid unnecessarily. They need to be out there as witnesses in the public school. What you're doing is wrong. How would you respond to that person?
I would say thank you for your opinion, but the education of my children is ultimately my responsibility under God. I will have to answer for it at the end of time. I will certainly take your arguments into account, but I will come to my own decision on this. And one of the things I think we need to avoid, which is rife in this discussion, is so much of the discussion is anecdotal. The things that, when I was writing for Ref 21, the things that always got me the most hate mail was if ever I had a little poke at homeschooling. By poke, I mean if ever I implied that homeschooling shouldn't be the absolute norm for everyone, everywhere, every time and every place, I would get ferocious emails. And they were always full of anecdotal, I know a boy went to the public school and they put a silicon chip in the back of his head and brainwashed him and he became a zombie. It was those sort of, I kid you not, it was that.
So you're suggesting that doesn't happen every day?
I don't think it happens everywhere.
You are so naive.
I put chips in my own kids' heads that way,
But I think we can end up with, people who oppose homeschooling say, well, all homeschool kids end up socially awkward. Right. All Christian school kids end up incapable of handling people who are different to themselves. All public school kids end up brainwashed by the government. Now, there are probably anecdotal examples that are true that you could pull from all three of those. Right. But the bottom line is that's not an argument for or against any particular mode of education, because kids are kids. There are a certain proportion of kids who are weird, and wherever you put them, they're going to end up weird.
Yeah. Yep.
So the argument,
I wonder if you know it if your own kids are weird.
Yeah.
I would.
My kids are just like me, so I think they're totally normal. But I think the argument needs to be done principially, respectfully, and I also think it needs to be done in a way that acknowledges Christian liberty of conscience. You see, again, to bring it back to the very practical ecclesiastical question, are you going to discipline somebody on the basis of an educational decision for their kids? Now, I could imagine a situation where a child is so struggling in whatever educational decision a parent has made for them that the elders, out of pastoral duty, might draw the person aside and say, the child might be better out of the school where they're being bullied and being educated at home. Or maybe the child would really benefit from being in a Christian school rather than being homeschooled because they need to make some friends. I could see a situation where a session might give strong, pious advice. I find it hard to imagine a situation where at Cornerstone we would discipline somebody on the basis of an educational choice.
And I think that it's really wonderful for the church to have a mix of kids from the different types of education. I know I love having my children in with homeschool kids and private school kids, and they talk about that kind of thing with their difference and stuff, and they're good friends. And sometimes my daughters will get mad at me with like cell phone stuff. Like I don't let them have a Snapchat, and they just think it's horrible of me. Mom, the homeschool kids have a Snapchat. I can't believe, we go to public school.
Even the good kids have this.
Yeah, you don't let us do so.
You sound like a horrible mother.
I'm
Actually.
horrible.
My heart's breaking for your daughters
I know.
at this point.
So, I think it's really great for them to be exposed and have friendships like that in the church with the different forms. And then as parents, I love talking to the parents who homeschool and the parents who private school. And I'm sharpened. I'm sharpened. My children are sharpened, and I hope same with them. So I think it's really healthy for a church to have a mix like that.
Absolutely. And I think, Carl, the distinction you make is very helpful. I would agree. We do not have enough in Scripture for us to bind the conscience of people on. We don't have enough in Scripture to say, how dare you pull your kids out of the world where they need to be salt and light and homeschooling them. We don't have enough from Scripture to say, how dare you put your kid in public school and not homeschool them when it's so clearly biblical. We just can't do that. And I would admonish any pastor out there who is shaming people in their church over this issue that they're on dangerous ground for seeking to bind the conscience on something that Scripture does not give them authority to do.
Yeah, and when do you stop binding their conscience?
Right.
Is it at 18? Is it at 19?
Right.
Is
what
it
about
20,
the college
21,
they choose?
22? What about
Right.
the college
they
they
choose
choose?
not to.
Yeah.
Because, there's lots of people who strongly believe that they shouldn't send their children to higher education in that way.
Well, and you've got groups that, particularly with their daughters.
Right. Stay-at-home daughters.
It's wrong for a woman to have a vocation, so if you send them to university for anything other than maybe learn how to play the cello, then you're sinning. And then they're out from under the authority of the father. And
there are those also who feel so strongly.
Speaking as a father who kept his daughter at home for as long as possible.
She's still locked up.
Yeah. And she's trained to do what?
Play the cello. No.
She's joining the military, she was telling me.
Oh, sure. Yeah. She's armed and dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're armed
Her
and
dad
dangerous.
is.
Yeah.
Her dad is.
But there are those who believe so much that it's their, they should be the only educators of their children. They will not allow their children to go to a Sunday school class.
Right.
I've seen it where they won't even let the grandparents hold their baby during worship service because that is all their responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm a little
at that place
about
you get
that.
at that point you get into some strange
So there's this
stuff.
There's this fear that there's no one is trustworthy to share any of their knowledge with your child.
Right. Yeah, and that's problematic. And so I think where we certainly agree is that elders and pastors need to be humble on this. They need to know the limits of what Scripture gives them as far as admonition. I think we would agree that depending on where you live, elders might have wisdom to share.
Yeah.
To say,
respectfully share. I think.
Absolutely. If you're asking me as your elder, I think I would choose this direction because of this and this, but certainly we do not have biblical warrant, we believe, to bind the conscience of men and women
or in our confessions
on this issue. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Westminster Confession 20.2, God alone is Lord of the conscience. And I think there is something, we all like to control other people.
Right.
That's part of fallen human nature, and this can become a stick to beat people with. And dare I say it, going back to my earlier comment about that question of where do you educate your children, it can be a form of Pharisaism as well. They're educating their children in the public school or in the Christian school or homeschooling, and it allows me to feel superior.
Yeah, I think
I can
God,
be neglecting the greater things of the law.
Exactly.
I can be neglecting the greater
God
things
that
of
I am
the
not
faith.
like this.
Yeah.
That's why we need to
person.
make that choice in humility. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great having this talk with you. I would recommend the front of the bus.
Get back up there. We want to hang out with
that are
cool
listening.
kids.
Front of the bus is where
You're
the nice
cribbing our
kids are.
style.
That's where the teacher is, Todd. That wasn't a nice kid. He may be younger than you, but he's still a teacher.
I have a feeling the other kids respect me because of my friendship with the teachers. I just have this sense that they respect me.
You
for
define
that.
respect as won't sit next to you at lunch.
Well, I see that as they fear me.
Okay.
It's a fearful sort of respect, and you may laugh, but by the time I got to the end of 8th grade, the lunch lady was one of my best friends.
I believe that, Tom.
Yeah, that's
I believe
entirely plausible. Entirely plausible.
Well, thank you for joining us for this edition of Mortification of Spin. We hope that we've angered some of you soothed others, and confused as many as possible. Please visit our website, mortificationofspin.org, and we'll talk to you next time.
We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone. Hey! Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals, a coalition of pastors, scholars, and churchmen that exists to foster a reformed awakening in today's church. If you want to go more in-depth on today's topic, head over to mortificationofspin.org and enter the drawing for James Boice's MP3 set entitled Christian Liberty. And be sure to catch next week's episode when the hosts share some of their favorite books for kids.
We thought it'd be kind of fun to spend a few moments with you today talking about really good books for children, or for parents to read to or with their children. Books that help explain basic doctrinal issues, books that help them understand the whole storyline of Scripture. There's some really good stuff out there. Accessible resources for catechism for young children. There's some great stuff.
Don't forget to visit mortificationofspin.org to enter the drawing and hear more from Carl, Aimee, and Todd.
We got to have the Pink Floyd. We don't need no education.
We don't
make a plea for Floyd on this one.
Okay.
Which I try to remember. Mum and Dad say, "That's dreadful." You shouldn't have that. I was trying to say, "Look, it's a double negative. What they're actually saying is we need more education." But I said, "No. I don't think they have that good a grasp of English grammar."
It's a double. I would have never thought that way.
We don't need no education. We need more education. I still think that Fredo.
Oh, man.
It wasn't the way I wanted it. It's
the way Dad wanted it. Well, it wasn't the way I wanted it. I'm smart. Not like people say, like dumb. I'm smart. And I want respect. You're nothing to me now. You're not a brother. Yeah. You're not a friend.
I hope we got all this. This would be a great outtake.